that good? Okay. So we started with chapter 1. We finished with the definition of anatomy and physiology. And I said that we're just all, no, the book says we are just all made up of cells, and we started with breaking down the cell. What is the composition of every cell? And every cell, first of all, how is a cell made? In utero, once you were conceived, how is this cell made? We had to assemble atoms, right? And these atoms, because of their unstable nature, don't forget the octet rule. So no atom really stays alone. It can't stand on its own. At least the atoms that's found in us. There are atoms called inert atoms. They're stable on their own, but you will never find them inside the human body. So all the atoms that we contain, you find them bonding with another one. So we now, and you know now the difference between covalent, ionic bonds, and hydrogen bonds. So these are all the atoms, right? And don't forget, the covalent, ionic, and hydrogen bonds are the bonds that hold all the atoms in the body together, okay? When we have our blood drawn, they give you examples of your sodium, potassium. Those are individual electrolytes. But that's because they're no longer inside the body. So when they leave, when we have our blood drawn, they give you levels of individual atoms. They're already, but you see, their electrodes, they're charged. Your sodium, it's charged when they show you your levels. And that's proof that all these atoms, they have to fulfill this octet rule. And so because of their unstable nature, you should remember which of the three will be the most abundant. What type of chemical bond? Covalent. And you should know why, right? Why ionic bonds are not as stable as covalent bonds. Do you understand why?
They're not as strong.
The covalent bonds are the strongest or the stronger one, comparing it to the ionic bond, because they share it. Yeah. When they share, then they have, for them to be stable, they have to hold on. Whereas ionic bonds, look at these ionic bonds, they really don't have to be forming a bond. On their own, they're already stable, right? Except that positive is always attracted to negative, so you see them always together. But very easy to separate them. In that form, they're already stable. Okay? Do you understand? And then hydrogen bonds, you know what hydrogen bonds are. They really are not, they don't form a new compound. So these chemical bonds, the forming of bonds, breaking down of bonds, forming and breaking, this is what is referred to as the events that happen in metabolism. So remember, that's one of the basic life functions. That's what makes us human cells. Metabolism, one of the properties. We always are going through chemical reactions. That is what you mean by metabolism. So because we really, the atoms they don't stay as atoms for very long. We look at then at the composition of the human body, or each and every cell, in terms of the different compounds that we consist. So because they combine, atom A plus atom B, they always combine. What we will look at in terms of the composition of every cell is the compounds. Again, books, if this was chemistry, they're very strict about the difference between a compound and a molecule. But we're anatomy, physiology, so compounds or molecules, we use them interchangeably. According to chemistry books, compounds made up of two different atoms, molecules like atoms. That's, to me, I can use them interchangeably. That's according to your A&P book also. So the two groups of compounds that each and every cell contain are called inorganic compounds and organic compounds. Are you following? Okay? So again, we're made up of atoms, but atoms unstable, immediately they bond. So we look at then the composition, we look at the composition of the cell in terms of the compounds. And all of the compounds in the body are divided into two groups. You can either call it an organic compound or an inorganic compound. So first we look at the inorganic compounds that each and every cell should contain. In other words, if there's any cell in your body that is lacking in any of these ingredients we're going to talk about, it's not compatible with life. You're going to suffer, you're going to feel symptoms, and if you don't replenish it, you will, first of all, develop illness or disease, and then eventually you will die. Your cells will die, okay? So I call them your ingredients for life. All of them, you need them. They have their own purpose. So look at the inorganic compounds. They're very, very easy to write. They're simple as far as the chemical makeup is concerned. So what's the chemical formula for water, isn't it?
H2O.
Yeah, very easy. See? Oxygen, then carbon dioxide. Your salts, example of salt, sodium chloride. Very easy, very, very short. Whereas the organic compounds, they're longer. The organic and they always have covalent bonds, don't forget. Okay? So under organic compounds, you have your carbohydrates, your proteins, your fats, your ATP, and your nucleic acids. We're going to study them one by one. Don't worry about it. Okay? I think the students have a hard time trying to remember which one is organic and which one is inorganic. I hope you remember that the organic compounds, you get calories from them. The inorganic, they don't give you calories. Or, don't you go to the organic section to buy your fruits and vegetables? So, I hope that will make you remember that your carbs, proteins, and fats, they're organic. Then you just add your ATP and your DNA, RNA, your nucleic acids. So, let's look at so again, what do you need to remember? All of them should be present. If one is absent, you're going to be in trouble. All of them. All of these and all of these. That will make up a cell. So let's look at water. Water is the most abundant inorganic compound. It's the most abundant compound too in the body, period. Okay? So, you remember the hydrogen bonding of water? This hydrogen bonding of one water molecule to the next one is very important in the properties of water. Right? Look at it. It has a high heat capacity, absorbs body heat, because, see, it stabilizes body temperature. Isn't it that when you're dehydrated, one of the symptoms is you start having a fever or a temperature? Because the water, when you're boiling water, does it boil right away? It doesn't, right? So what's happening with water, you have to, I'm just going to look at this one. While you're boiling the water, you have to first break these hydrogen bonds before you then break the bond between H and O, and that's the only time it will evaporate. So you see, it takes time to break those bonds. And that's why it's very good. It's ideal to maintaining body temperature. Do you think there's a problem if your body temperature goes up? Hyperthermia. Can you die? Yes, you can, right? Hypothermia, you can die also. That's why we need water, right? And water is the ideal solvent. It's the almost universal solvent, isn't it? What compound does not dissolve in water? What's not soluble in water? What is not soluble in water? That's right. right? That's why we worry about the good fat and the bad fat, because your blood is mainly water. So chemical reactions also depend on water. Hydrolysis, dehydration. That's why if you eat, you don't drink too much water, you get constipated, you didn't digest properly because there was not enough water. Another property of water is protection, right? Like your baby, if you got pregnant, you remember, did ultrasound, the baby is floating. Your brain floats in water too. So that's why if we're dehydrated, you get a headache, right? Or if you get a headache, they say drink some water. You go to Safeway, you buy 3 pounds of banana and put that on top of your head and just walk all day with 3 pounds of banana on your head. After a while, you feel the weight of that banana. That's how heavy your brain is. 3 pounds, but you don't feel it, right? Like my husband is 225 pounds. But when we're in the water, I can carry him in the water, no problem. I don't feel his weight. That's the same for our brain. We don't feel it. That's important. That's the importance of water. Or just think about your joints. If you're dehydrated, don't you feel it in your joints? Because your synovial fluid, that's just about 1 ml of water. But dehydration affects that. Water is the main component of what? Your blood. So blood pressure. So if you see how important water is, don't forget, it's the most abundant inorganic compound in the body. The next inorganic compound I want to talk about is carbon dioxide. What is the function of carbon dioxide? Carbon dioxide. What? It's a
Gas.
it's a gas. It's a waste product. So, waste product of metabolism. Do you go to the bathroom every day? Or do you go to the bathroom regularly? Right? So, this is our cells, that's their waste product. So, as long as your cells are alive, they have to produce this. Do you know the chemical formula for sugar or carbohydrates? C6, 3, 4, 5, 6, then H, C6, O6, right? Anyway, there. Okay, so. Anyway, like this. Okay? So you see, we eat our sugar, or we eat our carbs because we want energy. We're going to study this when we take up nutrition metabolism by 242. But just so you have an idea, so this is my pizza, let's say, and finally it's glucose, and then it will enter my cell. So when it enters my cell, the purpose, the reason why I ate this is because I want to get energy. So I convert this to energy. Where is the energy stored? In these bonds. So the job, every cell has a department there called the mitochondria. And that is where this is converted to energy. Okay? But in the process of getting the energy, the byproduct is carbon dioxide. See? I converted this to energy plus a byproduct of carbon dioxide plus water. So what do you use the energy for? To power all the cell activities. What happens to carbon dioxide? You blow it off, right? Through your lungs. And then what happens to the water? It's either sweat or urine. So, but you got your energy. So what's going to happen to the carbon dioxide that you breathe out? The carbon dioxide will go to where?
The plants.
Yes. Go to the plants plus the sun, right? And then you start watering your plants, you get your carbohydrates again. It's just a cycle or a circle of life. It's amazing how, I don't know, it's really interesting. Okay? So, you see, if you're alive, you have carbon dioxide. That's why it's very important for us to breathe. You have to breathe and blow off that carbon dioxide. If there is an increased level of carbon dioxide in the blood, let's say people have emphysema or people who have pneumonia, their breathing is compromised, they go into acidosis, which we're going to take up when we study chapter 26. But it's very important to maintain normal levels of all of these. It's not compatible with life if levels are down, not compatible if levels are too high also. We're designed to maintain, what is that H word? Homeostasis. That's what we do all the time. The next inorganic compound is oxygen. Look at, what do you need? What? In the conversion of your nutrients to energy, you need oxygen. Oxygen is necessary. Oxygen is referred to as the terminal electron acceptor. We're going to study that when we take up chapter 3. But, okay, to be able to get energy from this one, it's important that every cells contain oxygen. That's why we breathe, and that's why when you go to the ER, they do the pulse ox, and if your PO2 is below 96, they worry about that because the heart, we're going to study that, but the heart requires or has a high demand for oxygen. In the absence of oxygen, your cells or this process of getting energy, it will stop. And if there's no energy, don't you think your cells will die? Right? So if you don't breathe, you die. Does it make sense? Again, the oxygen is referred to as terminal electron acceptor. You know the electrons now, right? So remember, there's your protons, right? The protons, the neutrons, and then the electrons are right here, right? Do you remember how the atoms? Okay. So this one is an atom, this is an atom. And so then it has an electron in the outer shell. Do you follow so far? And when we break the bonds, the electrons again become very reactive. You see that? So when you break the bonds here in the cell, the atom that you just released has an outermost shell with very reactive electrons. Where are you going to send that? The oxygen is referred to as the terminal electron acceptor. To prevent the atoms with the exposed electrons again from harming your cell. You want to harvest the energy, but you again expose the active electrons. So you send that to what? To oxygen. If you're a bacteria do not require, there's some bacteria, right? They don't require oxygen. Maybe their terminal electron acceptor is nitrogen. Some of them maybe it's sulfur. But for us, we're humans, the only electron acceptor is called oxygen. Does it make sense? Everybody?
Oh, no, I scratched my head.
I see. Okay, so you got that? We're going to study that more when we take up by 242. Next, we have our salts, and then acids and bases. Acids, bases, and salts. So here you go. What is the difference between an acid, a base, and a salt? So you see it. If it dissolves and it releases a proton or a hydrogen atom, it's an acid, right? If it releases hydroxide, it's a base. If you don't see hydrogen or hydroxide, it must be a salt. Do we always have acids, bases, and salts? Yes. Even if you're not doing anything, you're breathing, aren't you? To be able to sit down and just stare at the stars, daydreaming, there's muscle contraction going on. And the byproduct of muscle contraction is lactic acid. So you're always producing acid. Carbon dioxide, on its way to the lungs, before it's released from the body, it combines with water to form carbonic acid. You have a lot of amino acids, fatty acids. They're always present in the body. The key again is to what? Maintain normal values. Homeostasis. If there's too much, you suffer. Bases, not too much, but we also have bases. But they don't give you as much of a problem as the acids, right? We easily burn with acids, okay? And then the salts. We're going to appreciate our salts as we proceed. So, example, sodium chloride, right? Sodium is the most abundant cation outside the cell. Without sodium, what do you notice? If you eat too much salt, you become
Puffy.
puffy, right? You swell. Doesn't it attract water? And so, if, let's say, you're dehydrated, they give you a high solute concentration IV to attract the water. So, very important in blood pressure. Sodium is also very important for nerve transmission. Same with potassium. So if your electrolytes are down, like potassium, you get weak. You don't react as fast as you should. Magnesium, very important in controlling convulsions. For muscle relaxation, you need magnesium also. You see? You're going to appreciate calcium. Calcium is the most abundant mineral in the body. What's the importance of calcium? Makes your bones strong, right? But what do we need calcium for? In addition to giving you strong bones, is there any other function to calcium? You're going to see that when we talk about muscle contraction. If you're lacking in calcium, muscles will not be able to contract. And do you remember, what is the composition of your heart? Isn't it? Muscle. So you see, if you were in the emergency room, I'm sure one of the ingredients in the crash cart is a calcium gluconate injection. A patient comes in cardiac arrest, you can inject calcium gluconate directly to the heart. It will revive the heart. It will contract again. You see how important your electrolytes are? Again, there's normal levels. We're going to study them one by one, but just for now, you should know that they are important. So you see, what did we discuss? If there's something missing, you feel the symptoms, you see. That's why, let's say today, I don't feel well. I am not well. There's something missing. Then you went to the doctor and everything, they drew your blood, etc. It's everything normal. Are you crazy? You are not. Because at that point, when you felt that you were off, something was off. Very easy to upset the balance. Diet alone, right? Maybe taking too much diuretics, maybe drinking that something over there, right? So very easy to upset the balance, okay? So you see, the goal is to be in normal pH level. Do you know? Look at, you don't need to memorize this one. Did you know that the normal pH, look at 7.35 to 7.45. How much is the difference of the normal value? Isn't it just 0.1? My goodness, or 0.10, 0.1. That is so narrow. You have to be between 7.35 to 7.45 at all times, moment by moment. But I drank my coffee, very acidic. I drank lemon juice. I had beer for breakfast. Look at. Oh my goodness, pH is so low. Thank goodness we have a lot of ways to protect our cells. Can you imagine if your cells were constantly exposed to these extremes of pH? Tomatoes, it's going to harm your cell. Your body, you have meat, don't you have meat? How do you tenderize your meat? Don't you doesn't acid vinegar, won't that tenderize the meat? Can you imagine if our cells were always exposed to whatever we put in our mouths? It will tenderize our meat. It will denature us. It will affect us, upset homeostasis. So again, our body, God designed us so we have ways of protecting our every cell from the damage. But once that those protective mechanisms are compromised, then you feel off. That's when you want to have yourself checked. So that's why, whether you're young, you're old, you feel okay. If you have coverage, or this country is very rich, they always find ways to have yourself checked. Go have yourself checked every year. Okay? Next, do you have any questions on our inorganic compounds? Now, we're ready to look at the different organic compounds. Look, I told you they're bigger. So again, so you will remember. Because in the comprehensive final exams, I will ask this again. Then all the way to Bio 242, I will ask it again. You need to know the difference between inorganic and organic. By the way, organic compounds are compounds that can be affected by exposure to the atmosphere. And it makes sense. They are long. That's why if you leave your chicken out for a long time, it gets spoiled, right? Same with butter, whatever, right? But you leave salt out, you can have salt for years and years and years. You don't change the composition of that salt. It's already in its basic form, the same with water. All of those inorganic compounds. But these organic compounds, they're affected by the atmosphere or exposure, okay? And I say that because you need to be reminded that your vitamins are also organic compounds. Don't forget. That's why when we buy our vitamins, right, doesn't it come in its nice container? There's a reason why it comes in that container. When you take your vitamins, take one, then we seal that. Because you leave it open, it's going to be affected. You see? Because it is what? It's an organic compound. Okay? So, if you may be just like some people, like my mother, she is always obsessed with trying to transfer vitamins to smaller containers, and it just annoys me because you lose the potency of whatever you bought. So that's why, especially if it says USP, that's why they come in their own containers, special color, all of that has been tested. That is to prevent it from being affected. Why? It's an organic compound. Okay? So let's look at the first organic compound, are carbohydrates, also known as your polysaccharides. Carbohydrates and polysaccharides mean the same. What is the chemical composition of carbohydrates? It's made up of C, H, and O. Look at the H to O ratio is 2:1. So in the test, maybe I'll have a matching type. In the past, I did this. I had a matching type, and maybe I'll just write the chemical formula, or I'll write monosaccharide, glucose, it's a carbohydrate. But you look at the H to O ratio. If it's 2:1, it's a carbohydrate. If it's not 2:1, it's a fat. The chemical formula or the chemical composition of carbohydrate and fat is the same. Fat is also made up of just C, H, and O. But you look at this one, it's not 2:1. Let's say H28, O2, then C20. You see, it's not 2:1. So that is a fat. just look at that. Hydrate, carbohydrate. So that's water. Okay? You're going to write down what is the basic building blocks of carbohydrates or polysaccharide. What is the most, the simplest type of sugar? It is your monosaccharide, glucose. These three are the simple types of monosaccharides: glucose, fructose, and galactose. But when they enter the body, most of this fructose and galactose, it's converted by your liver to glucose. So that's why you're going to write down in your notes that the basic building blocks of carbohydrates is glucose. If you have your blood drawn, they give you levels of glucose. They don't give you fructose levels or galactose levels. And the reason is the liver converts it to glucose. Okay? You got that? Again, basic building blocks is what? Glucose. I know this is monosaccharide. I know this is also monosaccharide. But in the human body, when they enter, the liver converts them to this one. Okay? So, what is the function of glucose?
Energy.
That's right. It's the main source of energy, isn't it? Very good. It's the first. It's the one that we always burn first. All our cells need glucose for energy. It is so important that our cells store it. You see? What's the function of sugar? For energy. Because I need it for energy, my cells store it. There are two tissues in the body that store it, making sure that even though sometimes I fast, maybe I go to bed, I don't wake up until 12 hours later. Imagine you're fasting. But that's okay. Hopefully your liver and skeleton and muscle, hopefully they have stored glucose to tide you over until your next meal. What is the stored form of glucose? It's called glycogen. Again, carbohydrate or polysaccharides are organic compounds, the main function of which is to provide you with energy. That's your energy. It is so important that we store it. You call it glycogen in animals. Where? In your liver and your muscle. There's a difference in the glycogen that is stored in the liver and in the muscle. The glycogen that is stored in muscle is locked in a form that cannot leave the muscle cell. So it's for exclusive use by your muscle only. The glycogen that is stored in your liver can be released to your blood so that normal levels of glucose is always maintained. Write down in your notes, there is one organ that is not able to store glucose at all. That's your nerves cells. So in other cells of the body, all the rest of the cells of the body are able to store glucose. You call them inclusion bodies. They have their own storage shed. But the nerve cells, they cannot. So they rely on a fresh supply of glucose all the time. If you have friends who are diabetics, isn't that one of the symptoms when their blood sugar is down, they're dizzy, they get disoriented? Right. Nervous symptoms is what you see. Why? Because the nerves do not store their own glucose. They rely on a fresh supply always. So look at, it's even beyond your control, right? You see how good God is to us. We sleep, we go to bed. Sometimes you want to sleep for 12, 13, 14 hours. I don't know how long you sleep. We're fasting. So how is the brain functioning? Because if the brain is not getting a supply of glucose, you won't wake up.
right? You will go into a coma. But you woke up, it must be because your glucose is still normal. How is that possible? Homeostasis. Your nervous system and your endocrine system. It's beyond our control. You know, insulin and glucagon. We'll appreciate them more when we get to the next quarter. But so there's two terms I want you to know, and I know you know this. Glycogenesis and then glycogenolysis. Do you know those two terms? Glycogenesis and glycogenolysis. So glycogenesis must be, what is genesis?
Creation.
Yes. So glycogenesis must be the event where glycogen is being formed. So just after a meal. Isn't that interesting? Once you eat after a meal, your liver cells immediately, they start packing their glycogen stores, glycogenesis. Same with your muscle. Then in between meals, you have glycogenolysis going on to make sure that the glucose level is within normal. Otherwise, your what? Your nervous system will suffer. What is the stored form of glycogen? In plants, you call that starch. That's the one, the carbohydrates in plants. Okay? There is another carbohydrate called cellulose. These are your insoluble carbohydrates. Do they have a function? What do we need fiber for? Cellulose.
Regulation and removing things.
Removing things. Correct. Very good. It is for regulation of your bowel movement, right? And don't they say that, what's that? The Cheerios, right? High fiber, it's supposed to help in lowering what? Cholesterol, right? Because if there's fiber in your diet, it traps the cholesterol, preventing it from being absorbed. But we do not want to overdose on our fibers. What's the maximum amount? What did they say? Your age plus 5? No, not that one. It's a maximum of 25 grams fiber for adults. Go research it, but you don't want to go over. Because if you take too much fiber, it will then compromise the other minerals in the body, specifically calcium, magnesium, and zinc. Very easy to get trapped in the fiber, and you're also going to suffer deficiency. So always go within normal, okay? You have any questions on carbohydrates? Next, no questions. Next, we look at our next inorganic compound called lipids. We're so scared of lipids, the fats. But again, this is ingredients for life. If you do not have it, you're going to suffer. Okay? Look at the composition. CHNO again. So in the test, sometimes instead of writing the word lipids or these words right here, I'm just going to write the chemical formula. And so look at the ratio. If it's not 2:1, it is a fat or a lipid. Okay? There are different types of fats. Triglycerides, phospholipids, steroids, and there's others. Your prostaglandins, your arachidonic acid, your eicosanoids, we're going to study them. You appreciate them more when we talk about blood clotting, okay? But the most abundant type of fat are your triglycerides, okay? Look at, what is the function of your lipids? Protection. For you, the only time you will appreciate the fat is when you look at the cow eye. But for when you get to next quarter, when you open up the cat inside, you will see and realize every organ in the body has that insulation of fat. That's very important, right? Because sometimes it's too cold out there. Every organ in the body to be able to do its job. Let's say the heart beats, does its job. But if it's exposed to cold, it will not be able to beat properly. So that's why there's that insulation of fat. Every organ. A fat is also cushion, right? Let's say me and a twig, a girl who's very thin, I fall on my butt, she's gonna feel the pain more than me because I got fat in my behind, right? So you see, doesn't that protect, right? Look at your vitamins. You need fat to make these vitamins. I know you know this one, right? For vision. I know you know this for bones. I know you know this antioxidant. This blood clotting. So if you're lacking in fat, you have breathing problems. See that? Another function is energy. It is your stored energy. You don't forget the word stored. This means when we're exercising, what are you going to burn first? Always the carbs, right? Because it's your ready source of energy. This is stored when you need it. Which means you have to burn what you have first before you go to your bank, which is this one. Okay? So let's look at these different types of fat. These are the functions. You see how important your fat is. So is it good to go on a zero fat diet? No. You cannot. Because you will suffer. So triglycerides. I told you there's many different types of fats. The most abundant type of fat, look at 95% of fats are your triglycerides. That's the most abundant type of fat. It's made up of this, what you call the free fatty acids, plus the glycerol. So these are the basic building blocks because this is the most abundant type of fat. The basic building blocks of fats will be the fatty acids plus the glycerol. Okay? For carbohydrates, it's your glucose. Only the triglycerides give you energy in the form of calories. So this one here, that's my precious triglycerides. That I can burn when I'm exercising. Can you burn your... Hello.
I want to know how much coffee she drinks before she comes to class.
I know. So again, what was I saying?
What can you?
You know what?
Can't you burn?
When you go, if you have friends, there are drugs to lower the cholesterol, right? Or this Lipitor to lower your cholesterol is so high. Cholesterol you cannot burn for when you exercise. Okay, no matter if you exercise 2, 3, 4, you will never burn the cholesterol. And the other types of fat that you have. The only type of fat that we burn when we're exercising is this one. That's why we don't need medications to lower the triglyceride. So if your doctor checks and sees triglyceride high, exercise. But if the cholesterol is the one that's high, maybe we need to start medication. No amount of exercise will lower cholesterol. You have to watch your diet then, okay? So, again, so what is the function of triglycerides? This is what is referred to as stored energy. This is the one that is stored in your adipose tissue. Do you know adipose, right? That's the one under our skin or in the pork chops, right? That fat part. That's adipose. Yes, okay? I love that the lechon,
That's my favorite. Okay. Yes.
The fat that's around the organs, that's adipose too, right?
That's adipose too. So,
And where is the energy? Look at, that is why it is the stored. Look at how long it is. And it's lighter in weight. Why is it lighter in weight? Less water. So, it's, don't you notice when you eat too much carbs like spaghetti, you feel heavy? But too much fat, not too heavy, right? It's lighter. So because it's lighter, gram per gram, comparing the two, you store more calories here, right? 9 calories per gram for fats, 4 calories per gram only for carbs. So your body will store this and use the fat right away. Less calories, so you burn that, and your body will immediately store that. It's present in every cell. Again, you call them lipid droplets. But there's one cell that stores, the job is to store mainly that. We call that adipose cell. If you look at the adipose cell, it's just all fat. Okay? And so, it's in the breaking of these bonds that give you energy. Okay. There are 2 types of fat, right? This is called saturated fat, and this is called unsaturated fat. Which is the good fat here?
The unsaturated.
The unsaturated. Why? Which one is more solid at room temperature? Would it be the saturated or unsaturated?
The saturated.
Saturated, yes. So they say that, let's say butter, right? My mother loves to put, I buy butter a lot of times. In a week, we go through a lot. Not me, but my mother. She likes maybe just 1/3 of that every morning for her toast. But remember, you melt the butter, right? And it really tastes so good. But when it enters the body, it reforms into its saturated form. And between the two, this one is very easy to form plaques in your blood vessels, right? As we get old, our blood vessels harden. So they're not as pliable as because blood vessels, they contract to push the blood. But as we get old, it hardens. You compound that problem, the hardened artery, with the fat right there. It's not going to be able to push that fat as it used to when you were young. So it stays there. That's when you start forming plaques, right? So cholesterol plaques also. First you have those fatty acids there, and then it will start trapping the cholesterol. Then you start having atherosclerosis. You see, but unsaturated fats, they're liquid at room temperature. And so they're easier to flow in the blood. Does that mean you have to now stop eating your saturated fat? Not necessarily. As long as you make sure that you're always, physically active, don't give it a chance to settle. Just make sure your blood keeps flowing. You see, that's why it's also very important to be adequately hydrated. So if it's dissolved, right? But look, if your blood is thin without any water or lacking in water, it will easily leak back into your blood vessels. You see the difference between saturated and unsaturated? Okay? You have any questions on triglycerides? What's the function of triglycerides? This is the energy. This is the one we burn when we exercise. The other type of fat, again fat, see? Phospholipids. You call them phospholipids. So look at, this is like a triglyceride, except you replace the one fatty acid with a phosphate-containing molecule. So you say phospholipid. It is still fat. Do you burn this for energy? No. This is what makes up our cell membrane. You see, we need fat. Without fat, we can't make our cell membranes. When we study chapter 3, the cell membrane is referred to as a semi-permeable bilayer. Controls entry and exit of substances. That's it. That's the phospholipid bilayer right there. Okay? Right here.
There's your cell membrane. The next type of fat is called your steroids. Another fat, cholesterol. You write down the word cholesterol. This is the parent molecule of all your steroids. Example of steroids. Look, girls, estrogen. Look at this, guys, testosterone. So if we're lacking in fat, you may have problems with developing secondary sex characteristics, right? Like the gymnast. Someone 18, 19 years old, you see the breast not fully developed. They're being I would like to thank my mom. Because this is secondary sex characteristic, right? Your female voice, the sexy voice. Because of that, you see? But if you're lacking in cholesterol, you see? Vitamin D! The parent molecule of vitamin D, that one also. Vitamin A, all of those. So we need that. Your bile is from cholesterol. Do you get energy from this? Calories? No. You will not burn this. So if you have too much, you need to be on drugs. Or you need to watch or control the cholesterol in your urine. You will never be able to burn that. What is the only one that you can burn? Again, triglycerides. That's it. Okay? And then there are other types of fat. Like, look at this one, your prostaglandins, your thromboxanes. You don't need to worry about this one. There's plenty of opportunity for you to appreciate them when we get to the next quarter. But like this one is the one that's important for blood clotting. So if you're lacking in your fats, you're going to have bleeding problems. You see, that's why in the nutrition guide pyramid, right? If you're on a 2,000 calorie diet, they say 45 to 65% should come from carbs, 20 to 35 from fats, 15 to 25% from proteins. We need them all. The next organic compound will be your proteins. This is the most abundant organic compound in the body. Most abundant organic compound in the body. And look at the chemical composition. It also has C, H, and O, but now you add that N, nitrogen. So it contains nitrogen. Proteins are also called polypeptides. Polypeptides. So peptide bonds, those are the bonds that hold your amino acids. What are the basic building blocks of proteins? You call it amino acid. There. So you see it contains an amino group. Amino acid. So if you eat too much proteins, you can have ulcers. It's acidic. Okay? And there's the peptide bonds that will hold many amino acids together. So what's the basic building blocks of proteins?
Amino acids.
Very good. Let's look at, is too fast? Okay, let's look at the function of proteins. Look at this. My goodness. Your enzymes. What's enzymes necessary for?
Breaking things down.
Yes, right? Digestion will be difficult in the absence of enzymes. If you have friends who are lactose deficient, lactose intolerant, that is because they don't have the enzyme lactase. And so if they eat lactose products, they don't digest it. They just poop it out, undigested. So chemical reactions cannot happen. What are enzymes? Proteins. Look at this one. For transport, like your hemoglobin, all of those
protein, anything in the body, once they enter, they need to ride a car. And that car is called a protein. That's how they're transported. Protection. You know the word antibody. I know you know that. Now you know they're proteins. So people, if in my country, in the Philippines, very prone to infection. Why? We don't have, proteins are so expensive. So when we eat, we got a big mountain of rice, just a little bit of protein right there. So we're more prone to infection. You see that? Muscle proteins, actin and myosin. Your muscle is mainly made up of protein. Collagen. Collagen is the most abundant protein in your bone is made up of collagen. So without collagen, how can you make your bones? Right? Your keratin, your hair, your nails, that's keratin. In your nails, keratin. Your skin, keratin. And look at this one, the last. You can also get energy from your proteins, that's true. But there's a problem. You do not, there is no protein in the body that is on standby. I am a protein, I'm used for energy, there's none. Every protein in your body has a job that it's doing. So, if you're in the zero carb, zero fat diet, you have no choice. You have to burn fat. It gives you calories also, 4 calories per gram. But there's a problem. You're taking it away from what it was doing. That's why people who go fasting, right? What happens? Yeah, they still survive, but you see muscle wasting. Now, they're taking away the muscle protein and converting that to energy. So their brain can still work and everything can still work, but again, because they're not meant to be burnt for energy. What else is the problem? If we burn our amino acids for energy, look at this one. This is the problem. Right here, this amino group. When we burn or when we get calories, the calories or the energy is in the C to C bond. This is where you get energy. This one here, you cannot burn that. There's no energy there. You have this one gets converted to ammonia, right? What is ammonia? Isn't it stinky? Isn't ammonia stinky? Isn't that dangerous? Right? So, yes, we can burn it for energy, yes. But the byproduct is called ammonia. And this one, immediately your liver converts that to urea. You see how important your liver is? And then your urea goes to your kidneys so that you can get rid of it. That's the only way you can get rid of that one. Why? Because that's toxic. Did you burn your proteins? Yes, I did. But I built up this ammonia. Thankfully, I'm healthy. My liver converted that to urea also already. Thankfully, I've been drinking so that I can get rid of it in my kidneys. So what are you going to tell your friends who still don't listen, or they say, I'm okay. Okay, can you please promise me? Be sure to drink your water. At least what they say, 8 cups a day for women, 13 cups a day for men. That's just normal. But if you're being physically active, you have to increase your water intake. Why? Why do I? Because you need to get rid of that. That is poison. If you don't get rid of that, and the only way to get rid of that is kidneys. You have to beep it out. If you don't get rid of that, where is it? It's in my blood. What's it going to do? It's going to affect your nervous system. So you become, if you've had friends, I met Barry Bonds in my other lifetime. I used to go to every state, go to the baseball. I just met all these baseball players, and he is mean. But they say when he was young, he was very nice. And I bet you that's the one. You see, if you rotate in the endocrinology ward, a lot of diabetic patients, their BUN is high. and they become combative, right? Their personality changes. They become aggressive. They're annoying, but they said she wasn't like that before. I don't know what happened to her. It's this one. They're not able to flush it out. So it's affecting their nervous system. Does it make sense? Again, can you burn proteins for energy? Yes, you can. But it's not meant to burn. Why? I don't have stored protein, stored for exclusive energy use in the future. Nothing. What is the stored glucose? Glycogen. What is the stored fat? Adipose. What is the stored protein? None. Any extra protein we eat is converted immediately to fat. I don't have any stored protein for energy use. Do you follow? Okay. Then, so here are the different amino acids which you are required to memorize. If you're taking A&P with a different teacher, but not with me, okay? So those are the different proteins. And so now let's look at the next organic compound called the nucleic acids. Okay? So look at CHONN. It's also an amino acid. They're basically proteins, but you add that phosphate. And they have their own category because you look at this one, the DNA and the RNA. These are our nucleic acids. What is the function of DNA?
It's what makes us who we are.
Yes, correct. Isn't that your genetic code, right? And so that's why every cell has that DNA. What is the basic building blocks of your nucleic acid? You call them nucleotides. This one, your adenine, your guanine, your cytosine, thymine, these are the nucleotides. Okay? And the DNA codes for everything about you. The formula for your skin cell, your hair color, your eye, everything about you. The DNA is located in the part of the cell called the nucleus. It is so precious. It's very easy to break this, right? Once your DNA or genetic code is compromised, that's when you start having mutations, right? You can start having cancer. So we need to protect that. It's locked inside. This is where you find your DNA inside. It's called the nucleus. But I told you it codes for everything. Let's say the enzyme. You need to digest your glucose. So you need lactase, you need galactose. All of those enzymes are coded for by your DNA. But it's very precious. It does not leave the nucleus. How do you solve that problem? You have RNA. So RNA is the copy of the DNA. Does it make sense? The DNA is right in the nucleus. It codes for everything you need. Everything. Okay? You need to make hormones like insulin, let's say. The code for insulin is right here. But the code right here cannot be taken out and put here in this, because this is where you make those enzymes. You can't just keep on taking it out, putting it back in, out and in, out. The constant wear and tear can lead to mutations. They stay inside. So how do you solve that problem? I'm just going to go inside and make a copy. And that copy is what you call RNA. So they are your nucleic acid. So you see, RNA is nothing but a copy of the DNA. This is the one that can be brought out, and then that serves as a template. That's the recipe, and you can start making whatever you need. So let's say this is the part of the DNA that codes for insulin. This is also insulin. That was the copy. So RNA was the copy. So this one goes outside. Now you can make your insulin without harming your DNA. Okay? We're going to appreciate them more when we take up cell replication protein synthesis. The last organic compound is called ATP. This is the energy currency of the cell. This is the gas. So you see, remember I told you, you have your glucose, right? The glucose from your food, your breakfast, it entered your cell, glucose. This glucose has to be converted to ATP. This is the fuel that the cell recognizes or the cell uses. It does not use the carbohydrate or the fat in its form. You have to convert the energy in the carb, the fat, or the proteins. You have to convert that to ATP. Does it make sense? And that's where in the conversion you have the byproducts, carbon dioxide, right, plus water. This is where you release, but you harvested the ATP. The ATP, this is how it looks like. You see the triphosphate. You see negative, negative, negative. Negative, they repel each other, right? So that's why it's ideal for energy. It's very unstable. You easily release the energy. But because it's very unstable, our cells cannot store a lot of that. You can store the carbs, you can store the fat, but not too much of this. It's meant to be burnt right away. So now we're ready. We're going to take maybe a cup full of inorganic plus 2 cups of organic. You mix them together, incubate, you have now your cell. Cytology. After the break, we study the cell and we start with our first lab.